The endless trolls on social media are always posting challenges to me, while never accepting any of mine to them. And one especially idiotic twit recently posted this bit of copy pasta at least 4 times on one thread, taunting me for not having answered it yet, when I have a life. When I saw it for the first time, he had already put it up 2 more times, as a distraction from the actual topic, where they were losing so badly that they posted this as a deflection, as if it was some kind of gotcha. So that if I don't answer this, he will brag that he beat me somehow. I bet you can't answer all these questions PhD evolutionists can't answer. And this is followed by a dozen or so false assumptions and distortions that creationists can't answer because they don't even understand their own questions. I told this guy that I don't have a PhD, but I can still adequately explain all the nonsense he posted. I also told him that it would be a waste of my time and thus money to post all these answers, which he would then dismiss and ignore without even reading them, especially since nobody else would read it either, not on that thread. So I asked him to pose it as a video. Then at least it would be worth my time to reply to it. But he wouldn't do that. He's just another idiot troll. His only goal is to waste my time by acting like an ignorant, impudent child. So I invited him to have a video hangout with me so that we could go over all of his questions, and I could explain them or explain what's wrong with them, and we could do it in front of a live audience where others would see through his idiot game. And of course, he wouldn't do that either because he knows he can't make a case, because he copied and pasted this from somewhere else and he doesn't really understand what it says. But he's going to keep posting it as a shutdown to all future arguments on any topic. I know because I've already seen it, not just in the comments of my videos, but in the comments of other videos, and even in science articles too, wherever reality gets too real for the wanna pretenders. So it would be appropriate for me to correct all of this, but publicly, so that tens of thousands of other people will get to see it too. Not that it'll shut up the trolls. They're not here to consider the facts or admit their errors. Religious faith is all about denying accountability. But they are always going to be wrong and dishonest and stupid. That's what they need to know that everyone else can now see. So here we go. Just ask any evolutionist to give every countable step in it to get to a cell, a brain, or a body by mutations and prove that they're all mistakes. Okay, 1/2 of all the steps. Okay, 1/8, 1/16, 1/32, 1/64, 1/128th, 1/256th, 1/500th, 1/1000th. Not one of them can give every step, nor 1 in 1,000 of the steps, not even PhDs. Notice the imbecilic strategy here. Science is an investigation seeking answers, where that means that we don't already know everything. Whereas faith is simply pretending you already have all the answers and that they're all the same answer, and it's the wrong answer, though they'll never admit that last part. Science has to explain absolutely everything right now, or else the make-believers will simply ignore everything we definitely do know and pretend as if we don't know anything, because it's the only way they can pretend that they know anything, which they obviously don't, really. And then there's the double standard that creationism never has to explain anything at all, because saying that a magic invisible man said abracadabra and poofed everything out of nothing is not an explanation of any kind. They say that we need 100% absolute, undeniable, irrefutable mathematic proof for every single aspect of evolution, but they don't even need the slightest indication of even a possibility of creation. And they can ignore all the evidence against it, too, and still make believe in it anyway, because, like they said in the Miracle of 34th Street,
faith is believing in things when common sense tells you not to. Huh?
That's how crazed creationism is. Fundamentally illogical, irrational, willfully ignorant. I've already posted separate videos on all of these, the formation of the cell and of the brain and of the body, but the answers are all different, and they're more complicated, than the question even allows. For example, the formation of a cell is not according to mutations, at least not until it's almost complete. And the formation of bodies happened way back in the pre-Cambrian, wherein several different body plans were formed, each evolving in different directions, and those basic forms are the ones that descendants still have today, those that survive anyway. But the important thing here is that while we definitely have identified many different mutations that lead to changes like the encephalization of the human brain over that of other apes, something that happened only 3 million years ago, this person is asking for the very earliest formations occurring between several 100 million years to a couple billion years ago, in a genome that is continuously evolving. Geneticists tell me that only about 1.5% of our genome is coding DNA, while another 3% is regulatory, and then another 10% is essentially random gibberish created by a buggy enzymatic process. 21% is parasitic viral copies, 13% is copies of copies, and 8% of the genome is made by endogenous retroviruses. But whatever was necessarily coded 500 million years ago might not be now. And we're not only talking about point mutations either. Some mutations can affect vast swaths of DNA all at once, duplicating long sequences or deleting them entirely, often without any apparent effect, depending on what type of DNA it is. Creationists do not care about anything that happened just in the last few million years, which is the most relevant when we're talking about, how we're related to the other apes. No. They don't want to know, they don't want to talk about what we can easily prove because they don't want to know that we know anything. So they only ever ask about things that are so far back in the misty shadows of the distant past that they hope that we won't have an answer. And that way they can ignore all of the answers we really do have that they don't want to know about and pretend as if they know the answer, even if they already know that we know better. This copy pasta piece even asks us to prove that all of these mutations are mistakes, which implies intent, as if DNA was trying to do one thing but accidentally did the wrong thing. Intent, in this case, is not evidently possible. That's their big issue. Believers insist that everything has to happen for a reason, that there is no such thing as coincidence. But even if there is a God, there still would be coincidences. Like if Jesus was really born on December 25th, it would still be coincidental that Sir Isaac Newton was born on that same day. So while every type of mutation we know of is incidental, unintended, it therefore falls upon the wanna pretenders to show deliberately intended mutations are possible by the means that their God would use. That means that they would have to show that magic is both real and a viable explanation. Good luck with that. If there's 1,500 living animal kinds and we have starts and finishes but no transitions, that's 3 possibilities. Like most creationist syllogisms, the premises are flawed and the conclusion is a non sequitur. The conclusion in this case being, I guess, that the cell, brain, and body are all possible only due to extremely dramatic all-at-once mutations with no transitions leading up to it, which is complete nonsense. The first premise is false because we don't have any animal kinds. One, because kinds have never been identified in taxonomy, and a kind in this case, or in this context, refers to a taxonomic clade, a category that includes all the descendants of that original form. But that ultimate common ancestor, the granddaddy of them all, and thus the entire category, began as an act of special, magical, creation by God. Now, originally, a kind was always understood to be a species, assuming that 2 animals can interbreed and bring forth after their kind. For centuries, the question was, whence cometh new species? Because kind and species were the same thing. But then the anti-science apologists realized that there are like 11,000 species just of birds. Just birds. And that includes 350 species just of parrots. And more importantly, while there are currently only 2 or 3 species of elephant, the fossil record shows another 160 extinct species that are not elephants, but are obviously undeniably very closely related to elephants, so that they all have to be the same kind somehow. But if you lump all proboscideans together, then you'll find that they're not a special creation. A combination of fossil morphology and genetics combined show that pachyderms evolved from a prior tethothere, a common ancestor with embrythopods, which are another half-dozen genera of elephantine beasts, as well as sirenians, a lineage of dugongs and sea cows, for which we have the entire evolutionary sequence, from 4-legged walking manatees through vestigial footed forms, all the way to paired flippered sea cows. Which gets us to why the second premise is faulty too. It assumes that we have no transitions, when we actually have thousands of definite transitions, even according to the strictest definition of that word. When every premise is false, the argument is invalid. Whoever wrote this idiotic nonsense goes on to say that the brain has 1,000 trillion connections, which it doesn't. It's only 1/10 of that. But on that false premise, they go on to assume that synaptic connections are formed by mutations. And that's the real failure of this assumption. Creationists think that without their magic imaginary genie, then everything that ever happens just happens by random chance. They want everything to happen for a reason, but they don't understand that the reason is usually processes that don't need divine guidance. In this case, you can build synaptic connections yourself whenever you study your chosen vocation or practice martial arts or rehearse with a musical instrument. Mutations don't do this. Life experience does. The ability for neurons to make synaptic connections was produced by mutations in concert with other chemical factors. But those 100 trillion synapses in your brain were created by 86 billion neurons, each using that ability to connect with 1,000 or so other neurons in their immediate area. No mutations involved in that. And let's not forget that we're talking about a human brain, not the precursor of the first animal brains, which is a little more than a nerve knot with hardly any neuronal connections at all. Given millions of generations, natural selection is more than adequate to produce a potentially great brain, if it is exercised properly. Or if you don't use it, you can let it be a lazy and weak, barely functional creationist brain. The next bit of bogus stupidity is another erroneous assumption of random chance, ignorant of any processes. At this time based on the claim that the body has 7,500 parts, though they don't explain what they mean by that, because creationists don't have any clue what they're talking about anyway. There's a relatively modest series of sensors, several assorted organs, and 4 limbs, unless you have an external tail as well. And every single one of these things has already been explained by natural selection in an evolutionary phylogeny. If you doubt that, ask me about any one of them, and I'll either explain it, or more likely, I'll post a link to a video where I have already explained it. The next bit of idiocy in the popular copy pasta is some apparently mathematic confusion about amino acids, as if they should create more types of proteins than any organism ever needed or used. Then the author is obviously also confused about the formation of species, as if proteins equate to new body parts, as if a new body part needs new protein, or a different species needs different proteins than any other organism ever required. I've heard this argument a few times, but always from people who are so stupid that they can't understand how stupid they are. The arrogance of his ignorance is already impressive. But then he goes on to show that he not only knows nothing of evolution nor simple biology either, but he doesn't even understand his own favorite fable, not even what the words mean. And it is important that we get into the fact that even Christians, the Christian biologists, several of them, have come forward to say that Adam and Eve are not possible, that it is genetically impossible for all of the diversity we have in humanity right now to be stemmed from 2 people 6,000 years ago, or 10,000 years ago, or 100,000 years ago. It just couldn't happen. That we came from populations numbering tens of thousands, or at least 10,000, and in the hundreds of thousands of years ago range, and that's where the genetic diversity we have now comes from. That's even according to Christians, not biblical literalists, but smarter Christians than that. And finally, this troll goes on to criticize Lawrence Krauss's book, A Universe from Nothing, which, as I've already explained so many times, was just a tongue-in-cheek title. But creationists usually don't read past the title. Krauss didn't mean a literal nothing. He redefined nothing for the purpose of his book. It is not what creationists mean when they talk about an absolute philosophical nothing. Why is there something rather than nothing? Because there was never just nothing. There's no infinite regress there either. There is an infinity, but it's not regressive. Not that any of that matters, because we were supposed to be talking about evolution, not cosmogony. But then dumbass creationists are so dumb they can't tell population genetics apart from astrophysics, because they don't know anything about either one, nor anything else either. If we want believers to understand this, then instead of citing peer-reviewed journals full of multisyllabic technical terms, maybe we should dumb it all the way down to a cartoonish level.
let's not forget. You're so stupid!